Hello, and welcome to my podcast. My name is DeBatto. Today I'd like to read from a recent article I wrote about the recent elections in November of 2020 in the United States. And I think the best way to do that is to read from the article. So, without further ado, this is called Good Germans. The good German is a person who knows that there is something quite evil happening in their country, but being a good German means that staying true to your political party, to your government, to your tribe, and not rocking the boat, even when you know that something bad is going down all around you. You put blinders on and try to shut out the absolute horror going on all around you, but you can never really block it out. Good Germans vote for people that are rude, crude, aggressive, a little threatening, and who really like to shake up the system. Violence is all right if used for the right reasons. Their elected officials say and do things in public that they, the good Germans, wish that they could say and do in public, especially Donald Trump. He really sticks it to those socialist libs. Sure, he may ruffle a few feathers and maybe even break a few laws. But hell, as long as he doesn't put up with any of that liberal crap, he can break all the laws and traditions he wants. Good Germans didn't always agree with everything he said, and after the election, Trump really did start to say some radical stuff. He even seemed to be inciting people to violence to prepare them to actively stop the transition of power to Joe Biden on January 20th. By force if necessary. As good Germans, they believed every word their president said, even if it meant committing acts of violence against their own government, other Americans, or even sacrificing their own lives if need be. After all, they were good Germans. At the end of World War II, the American and Allied armies liberated a series of Nazi concentration camps housing hundreds of thousands of Jews, gypsies, gays, disabled persons, political prisoners, and other unfortunates. The scenes the Allies encountered were horrific beyond description. Living within sight and smell of one of the most notorious of these camps, Buchenwald, was the village of Weimar. American servicemen forced residents of Weimar to tour the camp, making sure that they saw the fruits of the master race and the final solution up close and personal. Some German women vomited and fainted. So did some men. The Allied soldiers then forced these civilians, both men and women, to dig mass graves for the deceased and carry the bodies to the graves for burial. Why am I telling you all this? Because those same Germans, those good Germans, refused to take any responsibility for crimes against humanity that were taking place inside the gates of the concentration camps located within earshot, within the noxious smell on the breeze, and within sight of their own homes. They knew nothing. They also knew nothing about the other horrific crimes committed by Der Führer and his henchmen since 1933 in Germany and throughout Europe and Russia. Of course, there were rumors and stories and even some eyewitness accounts from servicemen at the front or relatives in the SS or Gestapo. Those stories were terrible, but like all good Germans, they decided that if the stories were true, then they actually supported much of what they heard. They were Aryans, after all, the master race. And the victims in these stories were all Untermensch, or subhuman. The stories they heard reflected their true feelings towards these Untermensch. So why complain? Der Führer mirrored the people. They were one, den deutschen Volk. So it is as well, I would argue, with the cult-like supporters of Donald Trump and the American Republican Party. Maybe some of them were not really sure who they were voting for in 2016, but 4 years later in 2020, they knew exactly who Donald Trump was, what he stood for, and they absolutely loved what they saw. He was a president who finally understood them, their fears, their anger, their frustration, their disenfranchisement, their resentment at the coastal elites, the globalists, the socialists, the libs, the people of color, the gays, and that they're being left behind by a world that they did not and could not understand. Donald Trump seemed to understand all of that. He got them. And Trump hated all the people and the things that they hated. They had a lot of hate in common. And that raw hatred, that burning rage made them feel part of a larger family of hatred and anger. They had finally met their cult leader, and he had met his disciples. When all of these voters, all 74 million of them, voted for Donald J. Trump on November 3rd, 2020, they knew exactly who and what they had voted for. When Trump stood on that stage on Pennsylvania Avenue on the morning of January 6th, 2021, and commanded his people to march down the street to the U.S. Capitol and cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and "We have to fight," followed by "We will never give up, we will never concede," as well as other insightful words, the people at the rally, as well as Republican voters who watched the speech on TV, had no doubt whatsoever that he was revving up the crowd to march on the Capitol and do whatever they had to do to stop the certification of Joseph Biden as president, to launch a coup by whatever means possible. They had watched and listened to Fox News, Breitbart News, One American Network, Rush Limbaugh, Alex Jones, and others for weeks previous to that, announcing the March on Washington on January 6th, 2021, to stop the vote count for Biden. They knew, and even sitting at home watching it unfold on TV, they wanted to be part of it. And so they were. So it came as no surprise to these voters when they saw the siege, violent attack, and occupation of the U.S. Capitol that afternoon by Trump supporters, shortly after Trump incited the rally. In fact, in at least one poll taken after the insurrection from YouGov.com, 44% of Trump voters supported the insurrection and an attack on the Capitol, and up to 69% of Trump voters hold him totally blameless for the insurrection. 52% believe that Joseph Biden is to blame. That same poll shows 73% of Trump voters believe the QAnon lie that Democrats are a group of Satan-worshipping elites who run a child sex ring and are trying to control our politics and media. 52%. To say that the 74 million plus Americans that voted for Donald Trump on November 3rd, 2020, after experiencing his first 4 years in office were either naive rubes who unwittingly voted for a con man without having any knowledge of the kinds of action he would take or continue to take if he was reelected, defies all logic and common sense. It just doesn't pass the giggle test. No, they knew exactly who they were voting for and why they were voting for him. He was and is their hero, their torchbearer, the man who best personified their deeply held prejudices, racial and ethnic hatred and bigotry, fear of technology and internationalism, of socialism, whatever that is, of being left behind in an ever-changing world they understand less and less, a world that they believe hates Christianity and the white race. Trump also understands their need to violently act out to take back whatever they perceive was stolen from them. In fact, he encouraged their violence and their hatred. He was one of them, and they loved him for it. As good Germans do, they owed it to him to support his every wish, even if that wish included insurrection, a coup, treason, and murder. After all, that is what good Germans do.